Okay, so welcome to our very first installment of the Behavior Basics. My name is Amanda Hoban. I'm one of the behavior coaches working primarily in non-public schools. So I'm so glad you were able to come and join us today. Jake is also with us. If you want to introduce yourself, Jake.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jake Graham. I'm a social emotional learning teacher and autistic support teacher. And one of my newest positions is also a behavior coach for the non-pub sector. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. So the whole, I guess, premise of this is really to just provide you with some foundational skills and some understanding as we move forward with these sessions that we'll be having every month. We do have some housekeeping we put in here, and you'll see this during each session. I think everyone on here is already registered on Frontline for Act 48 credits. Those will be given out at the end of the year, so our secretary takes care of that on her end. We will take attendance at the completion of the meeting, so Zoom lets us know that you were here and the amount of time that was completed, so that will be helpful for us. So if you're able to, please stay for the entirety of the meeting. As I mentioned before, we will record this, so the session will be available at a later time if you'd like to view that or if your colleagues would like to view that. And then stay until the end to complete a survey, ask questions, and be entered for a prize in December. So whenever you complete the survey, that'll tell us that you participated in that, and we'll put your name into a pot for a little prize, for a drawing. So we do have a little poll. So Jake and we've done this. You should see a poll on your end. Do you see it? Okay, we want to do just a quick check-in with you. How are you feeling after the first few weeks of school? Okay, you're great. I'm thriving. You're fine. Everything is fine. I've survived. Or it's just been tough. Like you're like, man, this is a tough group I have coming in here and I'm struggling. Okay, there we go. We're like 50-50. We're doing great. We're on a roll. And then the other half, let me see if you can see this. The other half of you're fine, you survived. So that is great. And then you can probably see those results on your end as well. So, all right.
Split right down the middle.
There we go. All right, objectives.
All right, so each professional development session, we will have our objectives. Today, it's all about understanding behaviors. And first objective we have is understanding the ABCs of behavior. The second objective is to identify functions of behavior. And then the third one is to know the next steps in helping to alter challenge behaviors. It may be a little bit of review for some people. Maybe it's been a little while since we've gotten our degree. Behavior is definitely changing.
Got the pumpkins, man. Sure.
And it's a lot of the main points or key objectives that we'll have today will be like the meat and potatoes for future professional development sessions as well. So get into the meat potatoes of behavior today.
All right. First of all, whenever we're thinking about behavior, we really need to think about this in observable and measurable ways. Whenever we're talking about a behavior being observable, it's something that we can see. We can see out of seat behavior. We can see calling out behavior. We can see peers touching one another. I could say disruptive. Well, certainly the out of seat behavior and the calling out are disruptive, but those are subjective terms where we wouldn't be able to really put that into a context. But if I would say out of seat or calling out, those would be things that we could collect data on. Measurable, we can total the number of times the behavior occurs. So whenever we say that a student is out of their seat, we could all be in the same room and count the number of times a student is out of their seat or the number of times a student calls out. That's really helpful whenever we're collecting data to help determine the frequency at which behavior is occurring. And then the function of behavior is the purpose that a behavior serves. We talk a lot about behavior being a form of communication. So that is what we're trying to figure out, the why behind the behavior.
We love adding this little bad behavior iceberg. A lot of behaviors we see are these outwards behaviors, and Amanda talked about out of seat, shouting out. And you can see that at the top of the iceberg, maybe it's swearing, maybe it's refusal, it's biting, it's shouting. And a lot of the things that we may not see, the anxiety, sensory overload, stress in school, shame, discomfort, we see all of these different things underneath the iceberg, family dynamics. So we do see these like outward behaviors within our classroom settings, but also just it's really important to keep in mind that some of these things or some of these antecedents, what we'll be talking about in a moment here, we may not be privy to, or we might not even know, like what happened before school or things such as that. So the ABC of behavior, we're going into A is the antecedent, B is the behavior, and C is the consequence.
Okay, and we have one more poll for you just to kind of gauge this. If you're familiar with the ABCs, you may have heard them before. You might say, I've never heard of these before ever. And that's okay too. Okay, great. So most everyone is familiar with the ABCs. A couple are not, and that's certainly fine too. So we just want to make sure that we're answering any questions. If you do have any, certainly feel free. You can type it in the chat. You can private message one of us, and we can respond to that, or we can, do that at the end or we'll have that post survey, which we talked about. We just want to make sure that this is understood. Okay, what Jake was talking about was the antecedent. So if you see this little guy in this picture here, you can see he's got his face all scrunched up, his hand is on his head, he's balling his fist. We can tell here that this child is frustrated. So what happens before the behavior of the concern? When we're looking at this, the antecedent would be, let's think about the environment. Is it loud? Is it maybe chaotic? Is it the location of it? Maybe the lighting in the classroom, maybe they're next to a vent. What about the activity they're asked to do? Maybe it's a non-preferred task or something that's challenging for them. Is it the teacher or the students? Sometimes that's really hard whenever we're like, oh my goodness, it's me. Like I'm the person that's like, I caused this to happen, right? And sometimes that's really difficult. Or is it a request or a directive? They just didn't care for that. They want to finish playing with their blocks, or they want to finish recess, and they don't want to go in for math class. So we're seeing behaviors beginning.
I just always like to add for that part. It's really important for the antecedent, because if we know what the antecedent is and what's going to cause that behavior, it's really important we can sometimes have antecedent control. Maybe it's two peers that, don't get along. We could place them apart from each other, or, we know an assembly or a change in schedule is a large trigger for a student. We can, work on communication skills, and we can work on like, what are we going to do when that behavior might happen, because there is a change in schedule for them. The B in the ABCs is the behavior. It's that observable, measurable act that Amanda was talking about earlier. It's that out of seat. It's the shouting out. It's this disruptive noise. So it's something that's observable and measurable. It's something that if we all went in, we would lay it out, and we would all understand and know exactly what that behavior is. As Amanda said earlier as well, the behavior is learned. It is a form of communication.
We talked a little bit before about behavior examples, some of those specifics. So we have some of those non-examples first, which would be disruptive, off task, inattentive, non-compliant, maybe defiant. Certainly we could all say like, yeah, I absolutely know what those things look like. But whenever we're looking at this in the context of the ABCs, we want to be very specific. So some of those examples, like I said before, was that out of seat, calling out, hitting peers, crawling under a desk, throwing items. Maybe you're thinking in your mind right now, oh, I know that one right there, right? Like you've got someone in the top of your mind who you're thinking of like, okay, like I see some of this with one of my students.
So now we'll get into the functions of behaviors. Typically, what we see from our students is they want to get something, or they want to avoid or delay something. I always like to refer to something called our seat. That'll actually be in the Padlet that I'll talk about towards the end of our presentation. We're going to have some resources for you all to kind of go back to, and to just touch upon the main ideas. Sometimes, it's great. You have this PD, and you might be taking notes, or you're like, oh, I love that idea. But then a few days later, you're like, wait a minute, what were Jake and Amanda talking about this seat thing? So we're gonna add some of our information to the Padlet for you guys to have a little bit of a resource. But seat behavior is it's sensory, escape, attention, and tangible. So sensory, it feels good. Sensory stimulation. Escape is they want to get away from something, whether that might be some sort of demand, or maybe it's another student, maybe it's a specific subject. Attention, is it from staff, or is it from peers? And then tangible is access to an object, an activity, or a location. Maybe they want that iPad. Maybe they want that fidget. Maybe they want that super awesome game that you do during indoor recess. Maybe they're delaying something. Maybe they're avoiding something. They have pain or discomfort. So there's a whole gamut of functions of behavior.
Yeah. So absolutely, like Jake was saying, typically a student is trying to get something or trying to avoid something. That's what we need to figure out what they're trying to either obtain or avoid. So we can think of this also in this can't do versus won't do with our students. If somebody asks me to run a mile, I can do this activity, but I really don't want to. Like, I don't feel like doing it. If somebody asks me to run a mile and they'll give me $500, absolutely. I can run the mile. And now I want to run the mile. So I'm motivated by it. I have the skills and I have the ability, and now I want to do it. So I'm going to go and I'm going to run that mile, and you're going to give me $500. Hot dog, right? They know what's motivating me and they know where my skill set is. But if someone asks me to run a mile in 7 minutes, that's a different story. I physically, like, I'm not ready to run a 7-minute mile. So I can't do the activity, and I know I can't, so I'm not even going to try. So that's really something good to keep in mind when we're thinking about our students. Is this a skill that we need to help motivate them for, to help motivate them in order to complete the skill? Or is it something that they really just don't know? So something to think about as we're thinking about our students.
The last part is C is our consequence, and it's any event that follows the behavior and influences the future rate of that behavior. I know a lot of times we think of the consequences being something, it's like the punishment or like something negative that happens. It could be the attention that we were talking about earlier. It could be, the student is removed. They go to some sort of alternative setting. They get out of work, whatever the consequence might be. It's honestly anything that follows that behavior. So we're talking about reinforcement and punishment next. Reinforcement results in increasing or maintaining the future rate of the behavior it follows. And then punishment results in decreasing the future rate of the behavior it follows. We'll talk a lot about reinforcement and really wanting the student to display the expected behavior. So it's more of a positive approach. Amanda, there we go. So our reinforcement, go ahead, Amanda.
Yep. So reinforcement is a consequence that results in increasing the future rate of the behavior it follows. So we might be able to add in things that would be desirable to the student. Maybe it would be toys or food or attention. Maybe some of that praise, like a high five, awards or certificates. Maybe we would take away something. When we think about a negative reinforcement in the context of taking something away, that can be a good thing. So maybe we take away like an added responsibility. You don't have to do whatever it is for the day. You don't have to do this chore for the day. Maybe you're removing some of those homework problems that were assigned. Instead of doing all 10 for homework, you were working so hard, now you only have to do 3. Well, great, that's exciting. So we are reinforcing the behavior by removing something from them. On the other end of that is the punishment. It's a consequence that results in decreasing the future rate of the behavior it follows. So if there's a misbehavior, maybe we're adding in an additional chore or a responsibility. Maybe we're having a small group, maybe for a behavior that's occurring, or there's some concerns with social skills. Maybe we're adding in a small social skill group, and we're going to say, we're going to take 15 minutes and we're just going to talk about this and try to increase the skills that they need in order to maybe have a different outcome moving forward. Maybe it is a verbal reprimand, maybe it's an apology note. So what fits the context of the situation that occurred? On the other end of that is taking away something. So maybe a timeout, a planned ignoring, loss of privileges. Sometimes that's the first thing we tend to go to with behavior. Even with my kids too, they'll say, Mom, I had to stand on the wall for 5 minutes today. And I'm like, oh boy, So sometimes that's the first thing we do is go to the takeaway. But there are lots of different ways that we're able to, reinforce appropriate behavior or provide, punishments for the behavior as well.
So we came up with this little
Example.
scenario. little sample here. So we're gonna just go with disruptive behaviors inside the classroom setting. So we sat down, we did some observations, we jotted some notes down, and we determined the antecedent for this student is math class. And the behavior of the student is getting out of his seat during math class 5 or more times each day. There's that frequency data that we talked about. You do little tallies or have like a little, I have a little frequency data collector. I kind of just click it or put it on my finger, however you're going to use your data or collect your data, kind of up to you. And then we just determined that he got a drink, sharpened pencil, used the restroom, talked to a friend, etc. And then the consequence or whatever happened as soon as that student got out of the seat was a redirection. So that attention he's getting from us by giving him that verbal verbal redirection.
So now what? So we can ask, so is that consequence that I'm providing, that redirection, is it changing the behavior? Well, we know that if this student is constantly up and out of their seat during math class, is my attention changing the behavior? If it's not, then we have to think about this. Well, what other strategy can we use in order to help redirect that behavior, not just in the moment, but for the student independently moving forward? So maybe we could add in something like explicitly teaching when it's appropriate to get out of his seat, maybe praised for the student whenever he remains within his space. Joey, great job staying in your spot today, and high five. So we're adding in that verbal praise for them. Maybe we're taking something away. Maybe it's those privileges. Maybe it's 5 math problems whenever the expected behavior is displayed. So certainly we want to collect data on that to see, is my redirection helping? Is it helpful that I've taught this skill explicitly? Is it helpful that I'm providing this praise to the student? So really it's important to just collect that data to see if what we are doing is helpful, if the behavior is changing.
Great segue to data. Oh, sorry, man.
No, go right ahead.
Great segue. This will actually be our next topic for our professional development session. I think the first bullet is sometimes a hard pill to swallow, especially, being in the moment. If the student is out of their seats 45 times in one day and we're like, oh my goodness, this is such a high frequency of behavior. And then maybe, next week we're putting these interventions into place and then it's 38. Is that still a lot of out of seat behavior? Yeah, but is it progress? Yes, absolutely. It motivates us to keep trying, as well as the student. Sometimes Jen, I'm like, hey, look at this. We were out of our seat this many times and now you're only this many times. I'm so proud of you for working hard. You're really working hard for that incentive. Pokemon cards is the first thing that came to my mind. So it's really important. It's really powerful to give that student kind of like show them what the data is as well. The other thing is we know what works and what doesn't. If something is not working, we're not just going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it and expecting different results. A lot of this is trial and error sometimes. If it doesn't work, we're not going to continue doing it. If it is working, on the flip side, let's keep doing that. We can see trends across settings and with students as well.
Yep. And then that brings us here to a Padlet. Go ahead, Jake. Jake is actually working on a Padlet that he's going to have a bunch of resources for all of you to share out.
Absolutely. So this is just a part of a project I have to do for working at the IU. I just dropped the link to it for the Padlet. And as I said earlier, the Padlet's going to be like your one-stop shop for all of these PD sessions. The first one, it's going to be broken down by the date and the topic. Today is the behavior basics. We're going to drop in that recorded PD session, and it's going to give you a bunch of resources. The first one's going to be the virtual professional development s'more that you can share with all your friends. And this has been such a fantastic professional development. Share with all your friends, get lots of people in, hanging out with Amanda and I. And then as I said before, you just sort of added some of the key concepts. There's a function of behavior chart. It goes back to that seat model that I was talking to you about, the sensory, escape, attention, and tangible. There's a fantastic resource available from the Iris Center. Amanda and I love them. They really break down behavior into simple terms and some simple concepts, and it really gives you like, I'm seeing this behavior or I'm seeing this. It'll really break it down. And that case study unit is based on defining behavior. And then the last one I have, the positive reinforcement, or the reinforcements versus the punishments. And the last one on there is it's our post-meeting survey. Amanda just pulled up the slide for you. So at the end of every session, we'll have this little QR code, and it's a post meeting survey. What do you think the most relevant part of our professional development session was today? Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments? Do you have any concerns? Do you have any hey, can you talk about, the consequences versus the reinforcements again? I'm really just have a couple of questions. So we'll get that information, and based on any questions or comments or whatever that you guys have, I'll add to this Padlet to give you some resources to take back to your classrooms and implement some of the information that we're talking about.
Yeah, and certainly you can get that survey code through the Padlet that Jake shared for you, or you could just use your phone to scan that little QR code there. But don't forget, everyone who submits a response, you'll be entered for a chance to win that prize in December. So we will take your feedback and we'll look into it. And if there are any specific questions, we'll certainly get back to you on that. But with that, like we said, we want to be mindful of your time. So thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking a little bit of time to come here and spend with us. And like we said, if there's anything you need, we're really happy to help. This presentation, we'll have this, I guess the link to the presentation available afterwards as well. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.